Firstly, a villa in Miami for himself, worth $34 million. I've been to Florida and can understand the taste of the president of Ukraine. Secondly, a house in Israel for his parents on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. It's worth $8 million. Europe, Zelensky prefers Italy. Tuscany, the best wines. By the way, one of the most expensive resorts in the country, Forte del Marbi. Houses here are worth their weight in gold. In 2017, together with his wife, he bought a villa 600 meters from the sea. According to the declaration, it was worth about $3.8 million at that time. Is that all? Not at all. From the south, we moved north. Not to Siberia, of course, but to London. Old Center, legendary Baker Street, opposite the Sherlock Holmes Museum. There's another Zelensky residence, an apartment worth $3 million. Why? Probably to stay while visiting his owners with a report. More on that later. Apparently, the real estate was purchased through the company of his business partner, Sergei Sheffer. That's why he's called Zelensky's personal wallet in Ukraine. I almost forgot about real estate. Georgia, not the state, the country. A new multi-story apart hotel in the city of Batumi. You might ask, Batumi? What is that? Well, take a look. It's also a seaside resort. Apartments are under renovation, but an expensive finish, panoramic windows, and views of the city and the mountains. Hint, that it was built for well-to-do people. At least 5 apartments here belong to Zelensky. Finally, the settlement of Levadia, an elite residential complex, Emperor.
Look, a magnificent view of Zelensky's house opens up. Here it is, a seashore over there.
Lions, wide staircases, and columns. On the roof, there's a luxurious terrace, a pool, and a wonderful sea view. But guys, it's Crimea. Crimea, which is currently under Russian control. Zelensky made a mistake here, and the Russians will surely figure out how to use it to their advantage. Zelensky's penthouse was purchased here in 2013, right before the so-called Crimean Spring. Nowadays, such a property could be worth about $1 million. However, a different amount is stated in his declaration. 1,384,000 hryvnias, or about $164,000. Well, we don't even need to mention the real estate in Kyiv or the official residence of the head of the republic in Koncha-Zaspa. Even without those, it's quite a collection of villas, houses, and apartments. However, the Ukrainian president is in no rush to give them to children, at least not to other people's children. Unfortunately, we have to admit the obvious. Volodymyr Zelensky has always been stingy and greedy.
When I saw this person running between tables and collecting tips, roughly speaking, making compliments with an ugly smile, right from that moment, he disgusted me. He was performing at events where the payment had already been made in advance. His group was paid in cash, and still, he was running around collecting money from the tables. It showed what he had initially been like.
He was visiting Hollywood here in Los Angeles. He privately requested for meeting with, and some kind of arrangements to meet and have a dinner with the famous Hollywood stars like Leo DiCaprio or others. In private, not through the protocol. As a president, already sitting president who went to private dinner with a great star. This is telling a lot about his greed, about his ego.
Actors are forgiven for having villas worldwide and making big money. That's their personal business. But there are questions for a president who presents himself as a man of the people and a fighter against corruption while hiding a dirty history of money laundering.
These mythical Ukrainian roads are only built and repaired in someone's vivid imagination.
The most ambitious project of the Ukrainian president turned out to be the biggest, with a capital B, embezzlement. In the spring of 2020, Zelensky promised to build and repair 6,500 kilometers of roads in Ukraine in a couple of years. In autumn, the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine discovered that 129 billion hryvnias went to the big construction project, though only 127 billion were allocated from the country's budget. At first I thought maybe Zelensky wanted to build roads not only in his country, but maybe also in Poland. Nope. Just 4,000 kilometers of roads cost 120 billion hryvnias. By comparison, in 2018, only 40 billion were spent on 3,800 kilometers of roads. So the cost per kilometer tripled. Meanwhile, The same companies won a significant part of the tenders. There was a lack of funds, but roads are sacred. That's why 1 billion hryvnias from the COVID-19 fund were allocated to construction, while thousands of Ukrainians were dying from the virus. Moreover, 62 billion hryvnias allocated for cancer treatment were also spent. Meanwhile, Ukraine ranked second in Europe in terms of oncological diseases.
I thought that the systemic corruption built by Poroshenko in Ukraine could not get any worse, but Zelensky surpassed him. There are no standards, no principles at all.
In 2015, The Guardian named Ukraine the most corrupt country in Europe. You might say, that was before Zelensky. What about 2023? Well, nothing has changed. Zelensky continues to steal and deceive. Do you remember his words?
Наше найперше завдання
Our first task is a ceasefire in Donbass.
на Донбасі. Можу запевнити,
I assure you, I'll do whatever it takes for our heroes to no longer die.
я готовий на все.
I haven't heard a word about the civilians of Donbass, and I'm sure neither of you. Zelensky was speaking about the militants of the so-called anti-terrorist operation. At that time, Eastern Ukraine had been under shelling for 5 years, and that's why the words about peace were so eagerly awaited. I would like to remind you that in 2014, there was a coup d'etat called Maidan. Did it happen on its own, without anyone's help? I agree with you. There is no doubt. The opposition seized power with the support of various radical right-wing movements. The eastern and southern regions of the country stood against the new illegal government, but the resistance was brutally suppressed. On May 2nd, 2014, Ukrainian nationalists burned 48 people alive in the trade union's house in Odessa. At that time, Zelensky, a popular actor in Ukraine and Russia, had zero reaction. But the Odessa events became a point of no return for the country. Residents of Donbass decided to separate from Ukraine. In response, Kyiv declared its citizens as terrorists and launched an army against them. Over time, the civil war escalated into an armed conflict with Russia. However, all of this was preceded by extensive preparation and support from the United States and Western countries.
The United States has invested some $5 billion in Ukraine since 1991, when it became an independent state again after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that money has been spent on supporting the aspirations of the Ukrainian people to have a strong democratic government that represents their interests.
As a result, destroyed cities, chaos, and the loss of life on both sides of the conflict.